Hi, hope you're well. So about a year ago, I made some Sustainer compatible tool totes based on an old design of mine, but updated for the T-Lock Sustainer. These were simple plywood boxes, but with a bit of a twist in that the bottom tray could be picked up with the stack or left behind, depending on the orientation. They worked well, but I'm not really doing that kind of work anymore. And a year later, with the ongoing clearing out and decluttering of the other side of the workshop, what I really needed were some little plywood boxes to store stuff in. I don't really need these to be Sustainer sized, but as I've started down that route, I may as well continue to make them all interchangeable, and especially if it means that I can repurpose what I already have. I'm trimming back the lower section, the legs, if you like, of the tote on the table saw. And yes, I should have had the riving knife fitted, thanks for noticing, but it is just a straight cut and a piece of very dry 9mm plywood. So I'm comfortable with what I did, just as you should be comfortable with what you do in your workshop. With the legs trimmed back, I can reuse those as sides for the new boxes, but first I need to remove the wooden wedges that were glued to the inside faces to make up the latching mechanism. These were part glued and partly held on with strong double-sided tape, so I use my little low-angle block plane to take them back as close as possible to the veneer so that I can sand them flush afterwards. By the way, if you have a block plane like this one is the low-angle Quang Sheng, but they're all very similar. I've always struggled a bit with the central adjustment wheel, and I replaced that with one from Woodworker's Workshop that's just a little bit bigger, and it really does make it much easier to adjust. Costs about 10 or 12 pounds, and definitely a worthwhile upgrade, especially if your hands aren't quite as grippy as they once were. Anyway, with those little wedges shaved back as close as I dare, I wanted to sand them back as flush as possible. I used the big Merkur rotary sander, the Duros RS in the previous video, to take off some pencil marks on the thicker face veneers of some birch ply, but I thought this wafer-thin commercial veneer on the surface of this 9mm marine ply would be a real test of how delicately it can be used. I've got a P180 Abranet fitted, and I'm taking it very carefully as I know how easy it is to blow through something this thin, especially with an aggressive sander like this, but it handled it just fine, even on the corners where it's very easy to overdo it. Don't ask me how I know that. With those pieces ready to be reused and already the right length, of course, I can cut a strip of ply off what was left of the 9mm sheet to the width that I need. This will be good for the base and the ends of the boxes, and as I said before, it winds up being a slightly odd measurement because of the T-Lock Sustainer sizing. I'll flash up those maximum dimensions on screen now. The ends of the boxes need to be the same height as the sides, less the thickness of the base. If I was making this from scratch, I'd just cut the sides, then leave the fence as it is and use one of the sides to pack out the fence. But as they're all done, I've just set the fence and cut the ends to suit. And with those all done, I can cut the bases to length. Might as well do them together, and this time I'm using the sliding table to keep everything true. Construction is really very simple, with a fast grab PVA on the joints and 23 gauge pins to hold it all together while the glue goes off. The ends sit directly on the base to make a U shape. And then the sides are pinned in the same way with plenty of glue. The sides are 75mm high, 3 inches or so, and I use 3 pins at each end, 2 through the sides into the ends, and 1 through the side into the base. And then another 3 through the sides into the base. I'm using a 23 gauge nailer because I have one. The boxes would be just as strong if you hammered in panel pins, I'm sure, as it's the glue that gives the joint the strength. And these are just for lightweight parts that I collect together for various projects that I have on the go. A little while later, once the glue's gone off and I'm using the sander to clean up the edges, again a bit of a delicacy test for this Diros RS, and it does very well. Because it's a rotary sander, you can sometimes catch a little bit of oscillation with the lightweight boxes that aren't secured particularly well. So just for fun, I tried using it one-handed and holding the box down with the other, and it worked just fine. Impressive, really, for such a big machine. And the last thing I want to do is add some little corner pieces so that the boxes stack together nicely. I've got some small sheets of 3 or 4mm ply left over from another project, and I've cut a couple of squares from that and then turned them into triangles at the bandsaw. I probably should have made a jig, but it was just as easy to freehand them. I did make a jig to get them roughly into the right place on the bases though, where they were just glued on with some CA adhesive. And that's our 3 little plywood boxes made with some repurposed plywood and just glued and nailed together. Really quick and easy to do, and perfect for holding small parts or components for bigger projects. I certainly find it very helpful to corral all those bits and pieces in one place, and at least if you lose them all together. The system for making these is really straightforward too. I had a base template that I used to cut the originals, but for these I just used the boxes that I had as reference sizes. These are just for the workshop, so I didn't bother with the rebated handholds that I put on the ends of the originals, but if you're making them bigger or taller to hold more, then it may well be worth considering, as they could start to get heavy, depending on what you're putting into them, of course. Anyway, I'll call this one done for this week. Thanks so much for taking a look. As always, leave a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Take care.